resistance. There's molecular or genetic testing where they take a little bit of green plant material and test it. They look for very specific mutations. And so that's really good if you have target site resistance where that weed has overcome exactly how that herbicide works. But then there's also the bioassays where you have to gather seed and send it away. They grow it out, they spray it. It takes a long time. It's a little bit more expensive, but they can test for more things. And that also will pick up metabolic resistance as well, which we are seeing more and more of all the time. And that doesn't get picked up on the molecular tests. So once you know what weeds are there, are they resistant, multiple herbicide resistant? So what herbicides are effective against these weeds and where can I use them? So we know we've got burn off, we've got pre. If you see it written like that in all capital, all shouty capitals there, that means with residual. Post-emergent may have residual. Things like Everest and Sierra have residual even though they are post-emergent. Pre-harvest is good for perennials. Post-harvest, you would need to wait for regrowth on the perennials. Winter annuals as well, wait till they're big enough to spray, they're up and big enough to spray. But also you have to start watching your annuals that can still set seed before freeze up. We normally don't care about annuals once they hit, once they've set seed and stuff. And this is especially important in the pigweeds. Red root pigweed can do this too, but for sure the really bad pigweeds like water hemp and Palmer amaranth, and I'll show you one of my last pictures I will show you. And at the end of the day, we have to do integrated weed management. So you've seen me use this slide before too. This is what we're doing now, and we're doing a pretty good job, but we're mostly doing chemical weed management. We're using herbicide mixtures, we're using herbicide rotation, herbicide layering, we're doing all that thing. That's all still chemical though. So we're probably doing a little bit of cultural and physical. Ideally, integrated weed management, we have these 4 different colored circles. It's just a big fancy Venn diagram, and you want to be overlapping in a lot of areas. You want to be doing as much as you can out of all the other bubbles, not just the red one. We still need to do this because we're not going to not spray. You can't not spray. But anything else we can do in here is going to help us in our fight against weeds. So what I mostly concentrate on is these cultural ones down here, and that's anything from equipment sanitation, using cover crops if and when we can. They work really well in other areas of the world. Here we don't have much of a shoulder season on either end of the crop, so yeah, they can work in some crops and they can do a really good job, but they're not going to work for every crop every year. Using mulches where we can, that's been shown to really help with some kochia seed, really break down kochia and kochia seed production. Manipulate seeding date, either super early or super late, and then if you're going later, not super late, but either really early or later than normal, and then if you're going later, you would either use tillage or some different chemistries to burn off the weeds so that you're planting later in the spring, but into black dirt or nice weed-free soil. Using competitive cultivars, cutting the crop for silage if you can. If you have a use for silage, you can do that. And then we don't let those weed seeds hit the ground. When we're talking resistant weeds, we got to do everything we can to not let those weed seeds hit the ground, because that plant grew from one seed and they always return way more than one seed. Some of them return hundreds of thousands of seeds to the soil, and then you're in trouble. And so also manipulating fertilizer and seed placement. I am a big fan of the enhanced efficiency fertilizers, but I know a lot of times when we're spreading nitrogen on the surface of the soil, we know that feeds our weeds, especially things like green foxtail, green and yellow foxtail, the pigweeds, that type of thing. Using crop rotation as diverse as possible, but also crop life cycle diversity. So even if we do have a good crop rotation, most of us are just growing spring annual crops. Anytime you could put in a winter annual crop or even short-lived perennial, that does a lot of good to that soil and to the weed population. So trying to manipulate these, and then seeding rates as high as you can, and just so that you still have a decent crop and it's not so crowded and so thin it falls over. And then row spacing, basically narrower rows and high seeding rates generally for most crops. I think for all crops actually are best for weed control because your crop gets up faster, it covers the ground, and it actually shades out the weeds. It's just more competitive. It gets ahead of the weeds. So when you're looking at our guide to crop protection, which is this one right here, which the new ones will maybe be out next week. I'm hoping to have them on my desk in Carmen by next week, and then we'll start distributing them. You can get them either from the service center here in town where you do your crop insurance, or you can get them from a lot of our elevators, or a lot of our retails will provide them as well to some of their farmers. So you can get them. If you can't get one easily, call me. I can get it to you. We deliver them when we can, or we'll get one out to you as soon as we can. Anyways, table 16A and 16B are our burn-off tables. So this is the first place to look when I talked about all the different places you need to be doing weed control. We need to start doing more times of weed control to get the weeds under control, and especially so we've got less. Ideally, we would have less weeds to spray, so everything we can do culturally back here, everything we can do culturally to have less weeds growing is great. We have to do that, and you're going to see that in some pictures coming up. But once you start to spray, then spray smart. And so this is our burn-off table, so we've got all the crops across here, all the products down here. Some of these products will also have a residual component in them, but this table is just about the burn-off component because we talk about the residual later on. This is table 16B. I take those products that I checked off because I was looking at soybeans before, and then here's all the products and here's all the weeds. There's not all the weeds. Things like red root pigweed aren't on this table because they don't show up first thing in the spring when you're doing a burn-off. But again, this is if you're going to pick a burn-off, again, glyphosate should never be sprayed alone. You've got to pick a product to go with it because of resistance management. And then once we get to the actual crop tables, say I'm going to grow soybeans, a few years ago I did this in the guide and I reordered all of the tables. They used to be all just one big table, but now this is our pre-emerge, so that there's that PRE, that means it has residual control, and then these are post-emergent, and some products can be used either pre or post or both. So in soybeans, for example, we have dicamba in both ends of both top and bottom of the table. In corn, we have atrazine, it can be used pre or post or both. So there's products in here that might be either, but something like Edge or Authority, those are going to be a pre-emerge product. Just so you know, when we have a name and it's italicized, that means it's that product in the guide, that's its brand name. When we have a lot of generics, then we have more than one brand name in the guide, then we have to list it just under the generic or the active ingredient. So dicamba is listed under dicamba, but if you're looking for Extend or Ingenia, they're on the dicamba page. So look at your pages. Ethofluralin, now there's Edge, plus there's also a couple of other brand names of Edge. So you look under ethofluralin. So you guys have to get more familiar with active ingredients just because that's the way the world is. There's generic companies. I think we have 34 different glyphosates in the guide this year. I think I added 6 more product companies. They're all from East India or China. I don't know if they'll be on the landscape for very long. I don't know. But they have a glyphosate that they're selling in Canada. One company alone had 4 540 potassium salt glyphosates. 4 different labels. I have no idea why. You can buy them if you want. They're in the guide. Anyway, so the guide is getting bigger. Page numbers are here, but also this group here. This is very, very important. Herbicide mode of action. You have to know your modes of action when we're talking about rotation. We're talking about pre's heavily, heavily weighted towards 14 and 15. Lots of 14s and 15s. There's a bit of 5 in there. There's a bit of 3. But really, it's 14s and 15s. So you really got to watch that. And then, of course, anything goes down here. If it's graminicides, it's post-emergent, they're 1s and 2s, a lot of 6s and things like that. But you really have to pay attention to your herbicide groups because we're running out of groups to use on some of these weeds, and you have to be rotating them so that they last longer. When we talk about herbicide-resistant weeds in the West, I will show this slide. We've got wild oats, we've got kochia, we've got downy brome, water hemp and palmer amaranth, and coming soon, I think our next bad news story is Canada fleabane. But I'm really only going to talk about wild oats very briefly, more on kochia. You can see how big a font I used and how bold it is where I think the importance is, and water hemp and palmer amaranth. We're talking about wild oats. There is some information here on this Wild Oat Resistant Action Committee. So if you Google that, you'll find that on the Canadian Weed Science Society page. And so there's some infographics there, and they just have lots of information. If you're looking for information on wild oats, if you're testing for wild oats, as far as I'm aware, there is no molecular testing yet for group 1 and group 2 resistance, so you're going to have to gather seeds, send it away to one of the labs that will grow it for you and do the spraying. So it talks about how to collect them, and anyways, like I said, there's some really good information there. That's all I'm going to talk about for wild oats, but this one actually scares me probably the most because we have no post-emergent options. If you lose access to group 1s and 2s because they just are not working, you have nothing left post-emergent. You have some pre-emergence and you have some products that control. You have a few more products that actually do suppression, but you are out of luck when it comes to post-emergent and wild oats. With kochia, some of you guys are getting familiar with this weed. I know we don't have a lot of it up here, but be very, very careful. It is moving very fast. It's really all through the Interlake now where it wasn't there a few years ago. It is a tumbleweed. It can move that way, but we also know it moves on equipment, so be very careful. I would be really, really careful bringing any new equipment into this area, or used equipment. If you're buying new, that's good. Really watch your demo equipment and your used equipment where it's coming from. It was number 12 in our last weed survey. It has been resistant to a lot of herbicides for a long time. So it was first resistant to group 5. We're not really using those anyways. Not so much up here. 88, we saw group 2 resistance. So that's when I was just out of high school, and we have not, group 2s really have not worked on kochia for a very long time. In 2015, we started in Canada, we started seeing group 4s start to not work. In 2011, we saw group 9, that's glyphosate. And so this is right now dicamba and fluroxapyr. We know fluroxapyr is failing faster than dicamba, so they are starting to not work as well. So you need to be really careful with those and make sure you've got another plan. But this one is really frightening. This is group 14. That's AIM, Veraxer, Insight, Heat, if we're still using that, Authority, Fierce, those type of things. 2021 in Saskatchewan and 2022 in North Dakota, and actually it's confirmed in Manitoba as well now. So this is just a research paper. So Charles, most of the stuff I show you is not mine. I don't do any research. I'm just extension. I take other people's information and I get it out to you. So I'm always showing you something from Ag Canada or from North Dakota or from U of M or places like that, because we create nothing. We're government. We have nothing. So we don't have a research farm or anything. We just do extension. We just do demos and extension. So I don't do research. So this is actually from Charles Geddes. I show a lot of stuff from Charles. There's Brian Jenks. He is Western North Dakota. And then Joe Eichly is in here too. He is North Dakota State University as well. So I get a lot of information from those three people.